Are we good here? Yeah. Off you go. Got it. Just so you know, when the attack team shows up, I'll zip back to fill you in. Don't forget, we're grabbing drinks after work. Alright. Alright. Scram. Luckily, their chat ended without any issues. The other employee got along well with Yoon-suk. People often think that if you work for a big guild, you can boss everyone around. But that's not true. Regular people work in the guild offices, while hunters who go on missions are special because they have awakened powers. There aren't enough of these powerful hunters to handle all the work, so you can't just hire or fire them whenever you want. They're not like machines you can easily replace. This means regular employees have to be super careful around them. Jobs at top guilds were super sought after, but they had a bunch of drama that people didn't know about. Jin-Woo, who'd been listening in on Yoon-suk's conversation, suddenly caught what the other hunters were whispering about. Did you hear? Today's newbie is an E rank. Us people are talking about me again. Jin-Woo thought, slightly annoyed at how sharp his hearing was. But he couldn't just stand there with his fingers in his ears. He gave a bitter smile as the others kept gossiping cautiously. What? An ad rank, someone whispered. The foreman actually hired an ad rank, another worker muttered. That's what I'm saying. A third person chimed in. Jin-Woo could feel everyone's eyes on him, like he'd been hit with a brick. He tried to ignore them, but the stares were heavy. Seriously, why would he pick an E? Someone asked. Do you think this guy can handle the job? Another voice added. A few people nodded in agreement. Yeah, right, one said sarcastically. Then another worker spoke up. I'm not sure we'll finish on time today. So the worried voices buzzed around Jin-Woo, making it hard to focus. Jin-Woo tried not to laugh as people whispered quietly around him, clearly trying not to hurt his feelings. But honestly, he was used to being ignored because of his A rank. He shrugged it off, thinking he wouldn't be spending much time with them anyway. Just then, a sudden noise came from the gate. The raid party is out, someone announced, and the tired hunters perked up, ready to move. Yoon-suk nodded at his team, signaling them to grab their tools and head toward the gate. Jin-Woo stayed right in the center of his group as they walked back after the raid. The guild employees greeted them with big smiles. Great job, someone said. Another person added. Awesome work. The place buzzed with excitement. This was no ordinary team. They were the best strike squad in South Korea. Jin-Woo looked around at the hunters, all of whom were top-tier players. He couldn't help but admire their skills and achievements. There was one person who caught Jin-Woo's eye, someone familiar. It was Jungin Choi, an S-rank mage hunter and the leader of the Hunters Guild. Jin-Woo knew things could get tricky if Jungin recognized him, so he pulled his hard hat down as low as it would go. Luckily, everyone on the excavation team looked about the same, dressed in similar gear, making it easy for Jin-Woo to blend in. As Jin-Woo watched the strike squad, known as the best of the Hunters Guild, march out of the dungeon, one thought crossed his mind. Are these guys really the elite? He couldn't help but be surprised. Finding a hunter with a strong presence was tougher than Jin-Woo thought. Jungin Choi, known as the ultimate hunter, had a powerful magical signature that stood out. But aside from him, there was no one else impressive. Maybe they're weak, Jin-Woo wondered. But that didn't add up. He shook his head firmly, confused. Imagine being part of a hand-picked team of elite hunters in South Korea's top guild. The guild master himself was leading this raid. And you know they're only taking the absolute best along. Weakness. Not even in their vocabulary. So there was only one thing that made sense. Jin-Woo had become that strong. A small smile crept onto his face as he thought about how far he'd come. Strength is all about perspective, and the hard work he'd put in over the past few months was really paying off. Now even an elite team leaving an A-rank dungeon seemed weak compared to him. He could measure how strong he was by comparing himself to others. Thump 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 went his heart as excitement surged through him. Then, without warning, no one told him to, and there was no sound to signal it, Jin-Woo felt a sudden pull to look toward the gate. He let out a surprised gasp. Whoa! A woman with short hair was walking out of the place. His eyes instantly locked onto her big clear eyes. He also noticed her fair skin and sharp features, which made her stand out even more. Almost every guy would agree, she was definitely pretty. But what really caught Jin-Woo's eye wasn't how she looked. It was something amazing inside her. The woman, who didn't show much emotion, was bursting with an incredible amount of magical energy. Her power was on the same level as Jungin's, and maybe even stronger. Jin-Woo was totally blown away by her presence. It was almost shocking. Once he calmed down enough to think straight, he remembered who she was. She had to be Heezer, the only female S-rank hunter in South Korea. She was one of the top hunters, right up there with Jongin, and someone super important in the Hunters Guild. There's no way it could be anyone else. How many women in the country had that kind of presence? Still, even though she was such a big deal, Heezer's face wasn't really well known. She really didn't want to be on TV, so Jin-Woo had never seen her until now. The rumors that she looked weird, those didn't seem true. I wonder why she hates cameras so much. Most women around her age love taking selfies and being on camera. Maybe Jin-Woo stared too hard, because Haein glanced his way. He tried to hide, but her eyes swept past him without noticing. She frowned, looking confused. What just happened? Did she just sense someone nearby? Or was she imagining things? At first she thought it might be President Go stopping by. But then that feeling vanished. It was like her mind had played a trick on her. After all, presidents are super busy, and don't usually drop by without notice. But here's the thing. Her little mix-up turned out to have serious consequences. Haein had supercharged her senses to track down the strange presence, but it made the awful smell around her even stronger. The stench hit her so hard that she gagged. She quickly covered her nose with a handkerchief, like she always did, and stumbled away from the other hunters. Jin-Woo let out a quiet sigh of relief as he watched her go. Her senses are way sharper than I thought. She realized. The raid team had just left the dungeon, and Yoon-suk was ready for his moment. He spun around to face his crew, clapped his hands loudly, and boomed in a super energetic voice.
No.
Alright. It's our time to shine. Let's crush this. Arts first. The collection team stepped through the gate, just like they'd planned. Then the excavation team followed. Jin-Woo lingered outside for a second. He was totally in awe of his first glimpse of an A-rank gate. It was even more massive and intense than he'd imagined. Just then, Yoon-suk walked up to him, a big grin on his face.
Hey son, what's going on?
Why are you just standing there? We have to go in too. Let's do this, Jin-Woo said, following the others through the shimmering portal. As soon as he stepped inside, a message flashed in his mind. You've entered the dungeon. Jin-Woo looked around, confused. Wait, is there wind blowing inside a dungeon? He tilted his head and listened closely. Sure enough, an eerie gust was coming from deeper within the cave. It sent chills down his spine. A shiver ran down Jin-Woo's spine as he suddenly figured out what the wind really was. It wasn't just any ordinary breeze. It was a surge of magical energy. The power pouring out of the A-rank dungeon boss was so strong that Jin-Woo could actually feel it, like waves crashing against him. Since S-rank dungeons were super rare even worldwide, this had to be one of the most powerful monsters Jin-Woo would ever face. Now he couldn't wait to get a glimpse of this incredible creature with his own eyes. The cold air made Jin-Woo shiver, but he couldn't wipe the grin off his face. It was like having a hunter's instinct spotting prey, and being ready for the challenge. Suddenly, someone bumped into him from behind, and Jin-Woo jerked sideways, startled. Come on, let's go. Shangli shot Jin-Woo a dirty look and muttered under his breath. The inside of this A-rank dungeon was as big as a giant cave, with plenty of corners to duck into, if you wanted to avoid someone. But Sungwoo was annoyed with how the temp just stood there like he owned the place, not moving an inch. He tried to bump into Jin-Woo on purpose, hoping to get a rise out of him. But something about this guy just didn't add up. He's as solid as a concrete pillar, or something. When someone tried to push past Jin-Woo, they'd just bounce right back, which was super annoying. How could some lowly E-rank guy be so tough? Songwoo was a C-rank. But this temp was just an E. Sure, he'd been sent to the excavation team, because others in his rank were better, but that didn't mean he was about to look weak in front of an E-rank. Nobody. Seongru's eyes narrowed as he glared at the guy who'd bumped into him. This newbie hadn't even flinched. Seongru's furious. Hey you, he shouted, his voice rising. Shouldn't you apologize for running into me? The guy slowly turned around, and Seongru took a step back in surprise. Seongru's piercing gaze made it feel like laser beams were shooting straight at him. Seongru suddenly struggled to catch his breath, as Seongru opened his mouth to speak. My apologies. Seongru's face turned bright red as he stuttered. No. It's no big deal. His voice was barely loud enough to hear. He quickly looked down and hurried past Jin-Woo, trying to escape the awkward moment. Once he put some distance between them, he let out a sigh of relief. What was up with that intense stare from the new guy? Why was he smiling like that? Their eyes met for just a second, but Sang-gu froze and couldn't get any words out. He could feel his pride slipping away, but somehow he managed to keep staring back. Is this guy really an E rank? Sang-gu couldn't believe what he was seeing. This guy didn't seem like an E rank at all. His stiff posture and intimidating stare made Sang-gu question everything. Jin-Woo watched as Sang-gu shook his head hard, like he was trying to get rid of something annoying, and then hurried off. Jin-Woo scratched the back of his neck, feeling uneasy. Man, he muttered under his breath. He had been on edge because of the boss, and now he'd accidentally scared Sang-gu half to death. He took a deep breath and reminded himself, practice makes perfect. Maybe he was just being too sensitive. Whatever the case, Jin-Woo didn't have time to dwell on it. He turned around and jogged after the rest of the excavation team. He easily caught up with them and stayed toward the back of the group. If I go my own speed, no one could keep up with me. So he slowed down a bit to match their pace. The farther they went into the dungeon, the stronger the waves of magic power from the boss became. I have really sharp senses. Even though the boss was deep inside, he could sense it all the way from near the entrance. Jin-Woo's heart pounded in his chest like a drum. Could he really focus on the excavation with all this excitement? Just as he wondered that, loud shouts filled the air. Heave! Heave! The collection team was already inside, working hard. They had tied up a huge magic beast with ropes, and were pulling it away. Another voice called out, followed by more shouts of heave. Since the brawlers were super strong, everything was going smoothly without any tools. Jin-Woo remembered how they tackled high-rank dungeons. First, the strike squad would fight all the magic beasts except the boss. Then, the collection team would drag away the beasts' bodies. Finally, Jin-Woo's team would search the cave walls for stones. To make the most money, nothing was left behind. Essence stones and gems from dungeons were a given. But even the remains of high-rank magic beasts were super valuable. Every part of these creatures' bones, hide, flesh had a use. That's what made a high-rank dungeon so different from a low-rank one. Once everything in the dungeon was grabbed, there was one last task: defeat the boss and close the gate. These 4 steps had to be done to say you'd totally cleared a high-rank dungeon. That's how Guild saw it. But Jin-Woo had another thought. If we're talking about physical work, wouldn't his soldiers be way better? This crossed his mind as he walked by some sweaty members of the collection team. The truth is, his shadow soldiers, now stronger after leveling up, would get the job done much faster than a bunch of C-rank hunters or lower. If Jin-Woo split his team into smaller groups for hunting, gathering supplies and digging stuff up, I think he could actually tackle that tough dungeon by himself. Jin-Woo grinned, feeling pretty stoked. He'd come here to check things out, and now he was glad he did. The boss walked up to him. Hey Sung, why the big smile? He asked. Jin-Woo was smiling quietly, and the foreman couldn't help but wonder why an E-rank hunter would look so calm in a high-rank dungeon for the first time. Jin-Woo's response was simple. The magic beasts were way bigger than he'd imagined. The foreman nodded, seeming to understand, as memories of his own early experiences flashed through his mind. You think? Jin-Woo's eyes widened like saucers. I literally almost fell over the first time I saw it. Since they were already talking about it, Jin-Woo couldn't help but ask a few more questions. So even if all the other magic beasts get wiped out, the boss stays alive, right? Yeah, that's exactly what happens, came the reply. The gate doesn't close until the boss is taken down. This meant one thing: they couldn't touch the boss until every last bit of collecting and excavating was done. Jin-Woo's curiosity kept going. What if the boss decides to leave its lair? The response was chilling. That almost never happens. But if it does, we're all toast. No further explanation needed. Everyone got it loud and clear. The strike squad took a breather outside the dungeon before facing the boss. The collection and excavation teams weren't strong enough to take on an A-rank dungeon boss, so they had to wait for the right moment. Luckily, the boss usually stayed hidden in its lair until the dungeon started breaking apart. Yoon-suk wasn't worried at all. Aren't you scared that such a dangerous creature is nearby? Someone asked. Yoon-suk grinned confidently. Nope, not even a little. For 3 years now, I've been working with the hunters and nothing bad has ever happened. Don't worry, Sung. Yoon-suk gave Jin-Woo a friendly pat on the shoulder. For just a second, Jin-Woo felt a little jealous. People say that being clueless is happiness. But Jin-Woo's body was buzzing from the magic energy coming out of the boss's room, even when he wasn't moving. It seemed like he was the only one who could feel just how powerful the creature was.
Yes.
Look at all these gems, the foreman shouted excitedly when he spotted a glittering cluster embedded in the cave wall.
The team didn't need to be told what to do.
They jumped into action.
Clang.
They dropped their bags, grabbed their pickaxes, and got to work. Jin-Woo found his spot among the sparkling gems. He gripped his pickaxe tightly but hesitated. What if he swung too hard and shattered the gems, or worse, broke his picks? He couldn't decide what to do and just stood there, stuck. That's when Jin-Soo caught his eye. The expert excavator was digging up gems like a pro. With every swing of his pickaxe, there was a steady rhythm. F-wish, crack, flush, crack. It looked almost like a dance. Every time he struck the wall, a bunch more clinked as they fell to the ground. Jin-Soo was undeniably a veteran at this. His skill was apparent, and he was twice as fast as his colleagues. Jin-Woo's eyes flashed as he activated his perception stat. As time slowed, he carefully studied Jin-Soo's posture, breathing, and movements. Jin-Woo replayed the moves in his head. Got it down. Grabbing his pickaxe, he stood just like Jin-Soo. But here's the twist. His strength was way stronger. Every swing sent big chunks of sparkling magic gems tumbling down. The sharp foolish crack sounds filled the air with each strike. Then, a clear ringing noise echoed from somewhere ahead, hinting at something exciting to come. The other members of the excavation team started to notice something weird was going on. Hold up. One of them said suddenly. What's wrong? Another asked, confusion in their voice. Look over there. Someone pointed. Whoa! Another person exclaimed. How is he? One by one, the workers stopped what they were doing and stared at Jin-Woo in shock. Even Jin-Soo, who was usually super focused on his work, froze with his tools in hand. They were all speechless. The new guy, an E-rank miner, was mining gems like it was nothing. Come on, people, Yoon-suk shouted, popping up from where he'd been counting the gems. He seemed surprised to see everyone just standing around. You're here to work, not to daydream. Sir, take a look at that, one of his workers said quietly, gesturing toward Jin-Woo. At what? Yoon-suk asked, turning his head. His eyes widened in disbelief when he saw what was happening. Whoa! His eyes widened in surprise as he watched Jin-Woo zoom through his work at 3 times the speed of everyone else. Sir, didn't you say this was his first time? He asked. I did. Sung-gu scratched his head, confused about Jin-Woo's true identity. Is he really an E rank? He questioned. Of course I checked his license, came the reply. Do you think I'd hire someone without verifying who they are first? Then what's going on with him? Sung-gu asked, gesturing toward Jin-Woo. The other man didn't answer. Yoon-suk had been quietly watching Jin-Woo the whole time, and now he swallowed hard before blurting out excitedly. There's no doubt about it. Sung was born to be a miner. No wonder Jin-Woo's impressive chest muscles had caught his eye during the interview. I've got an eye for these things, Yoon-suk thought, grinning from ear to ear. Suddenly, his watch beeped loudly. Beep, beep. Jin-Woo glanced at his watch. Whoa, time really flies. Before he knew it, lunchtime had rolled around. All right, everyone, let's go eat, their leader called out. Yes, sir. The group cheered in unison. Tools were dropped, and hands were brushed off as people headed off in small clusters. But Jin-Woo just stood there, not making a move. Yoon-suk noticed and walked over to him. Aren't you coming, Sung? He asked. I'm good, Jin-Woo replied casually. But how are you supposed to work on an empty stomach? Yoon-suk pressed on. I'll be fine. I had a late breakfast anyway, Jin-Woo said with a shrug. Yoon-suk really wanted to have some serious talks about their futures, but he couldn't just drag Jin-Woo out. He headed toward the gate, feeling annoyed. Then, a small smile spread across Jin-Woo's face. As his teammates walked farther away, Jin-Woo's smile grew bigger and bigger. I can't let this chance slip away, he thought to himself. Finally, he was alone. Both the excavation and collection teams had left the dungeon. He had about an hour all to himself, which gave him the perfect opportunity to explore deeper into the dungeon. Jin-Woo tossed his pickaxe aside and turned toward the hidden boss's lair, deep within the dungeon. The magic beast's energy hummed with power, steady and strong. Jin-Woo told himself he'd just sneak a quick look. No need to do anything crazy. Still, his heart started pounding like a drum. Thump, 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 thump. He tried to calm himself as he crept deeper into the cave, following the trail of energy. How far would he go? Jin-Woo stumbled into a huge underground room. The boss's lair. The tunnels leading here were already super wide, but this space was massive. He wondered if all high-level dungeons were this big. Then he saw the boss, and everything made sense. If that thing ever gets out. At the far end of the room stood a giant one-eyed monster. It looked like a mix between a human and some kind of magical creature. Its huge body was completely still, but Jin-Woo could tell it was powerful. Jin-Woo's eyes lit up like a kid who just found the coolest toy ever. There it was, a massive magic beast. He'd heard stories about these giants but never seen one up close before. The problem was, they were so huge that dragging their bodies out of the dungeon on time seemed almost impossible. Most people wouldn't even see one unless there was a dungeon break. Just being near this boss got Jin-Woo hyped. It was a huge threat, powerful enough to give him chills, but the thought of maybe not being able to beat the giant, that never crossed his mind. The I am now. Yeah, I can totally take it on. He gulped hard, his throat tight with excitement. Gulp. How many experience points would he score if he took it down? During his grueling week in Demon's Castle, he'd leveled up 15 times. But if one boss could boost him 2 or 3 levels. No, I shouldn't do that, he told himself. Still, before he knew it, the Barkus dagger and Night Killer had appeared in his hands. A big part of Jin-Woo wanted to avoid this fight altogether, but another part of him was dying to see just how strong he had become. Even though he knew it was a bad idea, his curiosity was eating away at him. Right, as he was about to act, a sharp voice cut through the air behind him. What are you even doing? His heart sank instantly. How did she sneak up on me like that? He hadn't noticed her approaching. He'd been way too focused on the boss in front of him. Jin-Woo let out a deep sigh. Feeling defeated, there was no point in trying to hide it now. He turned around slowly, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Well. Jin-Woo couldn't stop staring at the boss. He had to snap out of it, especially with someone watching. The hunters had paid for the raid permit, so technically the boss belonged to them. If he took it down now, the gate would shut, and the guild would lose big time. That'd be a disaster. He was so focused on leveling up that he almost messed with something that wasn't his to touch. Luckily, the voice's owner stepped closer, and Jin-Woo finally came back to reality, letting out a sigh of relief. I asked what you were doing.
Jin-Woo said.
Trying to sound casual despite the guilty look on his face. He forced a sheepish grin. I got lost and ended up all the way here.
Almost?
The girl raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Jin-Woo finally got a good look at her, and his eyes widened in surprise.
Wait, isn't that? It was Hanning Cha.
The super famous S-rank hunter. He had seen her right before he entered the dungeon. Hein walked closer, studying Jin-Woo's hands carefully. I could have sworn I saw him holding some kind of weapon, she muttered to herself. But now there was nothing there.